I think you've just taken us to the topic of our program today. We've invested thousands of hours for the past several years working closely with corporate, education, nonprofit executives across the nation, and as you talked about, across the world. And I think that the chief emphasis of our work has been to help them assess the extent to which their leadership positively impacts their organization. And we've also looked at organizational health, and which includes culture, systems, employee engagement, satisfaction, communication, the propensity for the organization to be able to be adaptive in a very changing landscape. And I think that in most cases, we found that the health of the organization in all of those areas has been directly connected with the effectiveness of leaders at the executive level. And in cases where leaders were not meeting their goals, or organizations were not as strong as maybe they could be or they should be, it wasn't usually due to a lack of familiarity with technical knowledge, but there was that softer skill that you just alluded to that maybe was missing or was deficient. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And one of the things that we've done in both our research and in our practice is we've found that many people maybe possess an aversion to exploring the relationship of the softer skills, or as you mentioned earlier, emotional intelligence to organizational effectiveness. But I think that we both agree that the importance of the softer skills cannot be underestimated.
That's right. I have the great privilege of working with a couple of institutions of higher learning as a consultant now, and going into those organizations and assessing their health either in a divisional or departmental sense or holistically, with the entire organization, has proven to me that we have failed in our society as a whole to fully understand those softer skills, and especially one's emotional intelligence, as a variable that really, really makes for great success. And so, as you know, we go into an organization and try to assess it and sort of what we call is be the invisible walkabout person, so that we can go in and really see how the organization functions on a day-to-day basis. And almost every time we have looked at this is the place where the organization unknowingly doesn't address those issues. When we have pointed them out and we've begun to work with the leadership, the management team or the cabinet or the board of trustees, whatever it happens to be, they then begin to understand the importance of it. And the literature is replete with information concerning this whole concept of that it's a variable. And the interesting part about this, Tony, and I think you understand this maybe even better than I, and that is worldwide, this is a phenomenon. It's not a cultural thing. It's not Western. It's not Eastern. It is really across the world. This has been something that has really been consistent across.
Let's talk about some of the research that we've done. One of the things I think is important is to identify or to define what we mean by emotional intelligence. And that's your ability to recognize and understand emotions in yourself and others, and your ability to use this awareness to manage your behavior and your relationships. And Daniel Goleman is somebody that we reference quite often in our work. And in a study that he conducted that involved 15 global businesses, it was determined that 90% of the difference between average and exceptional leaders was due to emotional competencies. That's huge. He also cited a study analyzing 181 positions from 121 worldwide organizations. And the findings revealed that 67% of the abilities considered to be most indicative of effective job performance were emotional competencies. The Weatherhead School of Management at Case Western Reserve University says this about emotional intelligence. They say that 90% of the difference between outstanding and average leaders is linked to emotional intelligence. They say that emotional intelligence is 2 times as important as intelligence quotient, or IQ, and expertise, technical expertise combined. And they also say that emotional intelligence is 4 times as important as IQ for overall success.
And you know how interesting that is to even say that and talk about it in a format like we have today. And that is that, you know, I think people of my generation, we come from 2 different generations, and therefore, you know, we have this feeling that there is some differentiation between us. You know, I am a late boomer, not a late bloomer, but a late boomer, and you really are an Xer, and so our perspectives are sometimes, if not oftentimes, quite different. But in our conversations over the last near decade, you know, we have learned to understand that there's some differentiating elements regardless of generational issues. And I think when I was educated, when I had those skills to prepare me to be a principal, to be a school administrator, to work from the central office, or even to be a dean, we didn't talk about any of this. We only talked about the technical skills, you know, the supervisory, the management skills, you know, those things that, you know, you and I would call concrete and sequential. You know, anything that was sort of abstract, random, you know, those people are the ones that go out and play the tubas and make sculptures. And therefore, they're not necessarily perceived as being good leaders or effective leaders. And so all of this experience and that we have found, I think reflects on the fact that many of us did not get the exposure and a formative time in our life for us to fully appreciate that. But the really great thing that I personally have experienced is that individuals, when you begin to work with them, you know, we do a lot of coaching, and when you begin to sit down and you explain these things in detail, give them examples, and you coach them through the process of what we call the soft skills, we are in a situation where individuals begin to have those aha moments. And I think that when we point this out, it really, really is an effective way of beginning to change that process to create more reflective leaders.
And I think that, though your education was decades ago,
well,
I love to say
you,
that.
Sir. Thank you, sir.
Mine was a little bit more recent.
Right.
And and both of us being educators at the post-secondary level, both at undergraduate, master's, and doctoral levels, I would say that things maybe haven't changed that much, despite the fact that this research has been available for many years now. Most MBA programs, most leadership programs are not equipping the students and future leaders in these fields to truly understand emotional intelligence.
Right.
And as we've just cited in terms of the literature, there is all kinds of evidence that suggests that this is as important, if not more important, than just technical acumen.
Right, right. Well, as you well know, I've had the experience the last couple of years working with a local institution that provides an MBA, Master of Business Administration. And they were insightful enough to understand that there were some missing components, and so they have injected, the whole concept of leadership into the MBA process, and have been very successful at doing this. And it's really amazing when you begin to work with these young, higher level ability students that are working on their master's, the MBA in this case, that they are not certain about their social awareness or their their own competencies, and because no one's ever sat down and talked with them about them. So from a coaching standpoint, and I do this in a coaching format, it's just really been great to see this awareness dawn on the faces of these 22, 25-year-olds. And so I know that it can make and does make a difference. So what we want to do over the next several months is to help people in the community, especially leadership that's looking for a fresh approach to their organization and how to revitalize it. And as we well know, we've gone through an extremely difficult economic time and just beginning to sort of rear our heads above water, so to speak. And this is one way organizations can regain the vim, vigor, and vitality of the past. And by the way, it affects the bottom line of organizations financially, whether it's a nonprofit and trying to accumulate funds for the public good, or whether it's a business that's trying to make a profit so that they can provide a service or a product to the community.